Every year, in the dead of winter, the world of professional hockey pauses. The fiercest rivalries are set aside, the battles for position are forgotten, and the sport's greatest talents gather under one roof. It's the All-Star Game, a glittering spectacle of skill, speed, and showmanship. It's a celebration of the game itself, a modern tradition beloved by millions. But what if I told you that this entire spectacle, this multi-million-dollar event, wasn't born from a marketing meeting or a television contract? What if I told you it was born from a tragedy? It began as a memorial, an act of collective grief for one of the sport's first and brightest stars. A man who was a champion, a pioneer, and by all accounts, a gentleman in an era when hockey was anything but gentle. He was a man who dominated the ice, who fought for a player's right to earn a living, and who at the peak of his fame and success had it all snatched away, not by a brutal check or a vicious fight, but by a single, tragic miscalculation on a peaceful summer afternoon. This is the story of the man whose death created the first All-Star Game, a man whose legacy is unknowingly celebrated every single year, yet whose name has been largely lost to time. This is the story of Hod Stuart. To understand Hod Stuart, you have to imagine a world lit by gaslight and powered by steam. The turn of the 20th century was a time of breathtaking change and stark contradictions. Cities like New York, Montreal, and Chicago were exploding, their skylines pierced by the world's first skyscrapers. The automobile was a noisy, terrifying novelty, frightening horses on cobblestone streets. It was an era of invention, of industry, and of a raw, untamed energy that pulsed through every aspect of life, including sports. In this era, organized sport was just coming into its own. Baseball was solidifying its place as America's pastime. But in the cold north, in Canada, a different game was capturing the nation's soul: ice hockey. And the hockey of the early 1900s was a different beast entirely from the game we know today. It was a brutal, chaotic ballet of violence and grace. There were 7 players on each side, including a rover who roamed the ice at will. Goalies were forbidden from dropping to their knees to make a save. The forward pass was illegal. It was a game of individual rushes, of bone-jarring physical contact, and of fierce, almost tribal, local pride. But the most significant battle in this era wasn't fought on the ice. It was fought over the very soul of the game. It was the war between amateurism and professionalism. The prevailing ideal, inherited from the British aristocracy, was that sports should be played for pure love of the game. An amateur was a gentleman who played for glory and honor. To accept money for playing was to be a professional, a word often spat out with contempt. Professionals were seen as mercenaries, working-class men who tainted the purity of sport with the grubby business of commerce. This was the complex, violent, and morally charged world that a quiet, powerfully built young man from rural Ontario was about to take by storm. He would become a central figure in this conflict, a man who dared to demand his worth, and, in doing so, helped build the foundations of the professional game we watch today. William Hodgson, Hod Stuart, was born on February 20th, 1879, in Ottawa, Ontario. He grew up not in the city, but in the rugged, frontier-like environment of Rat Portage, a small town on the north shore of Lake of the Woods. He was the eldest of 2 sons, and like most Canadian boys, his life was intertwined with the changing seasons. Winters meant frozen lakes and ponds, which served as natural, sprawling hockey rinks. It was here, on the vast, windswept ice, that Hod and his younger brother Bruce learned the game. Hod was built for the sport. He grew into a big, powerful man, standing over 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 200 pounds, a giant in an era when the average man was much smaller. He was a gifted skater, his powerful strides allowing him to cover the length of the ice with deceptive speed. He played the position of cover point, the 1900s equivalent of a defenseman, a role that required strength, stamina, and fearlessness. He began his career playing for amateur teams in his region, and his talent was immediately obvious. He wasn't just big, he was smart. He understood the flow of the game, positioning himself to break up plays and launch counterattacks. In 1902, he first tasted major success, helping the amateur Rat Portage Thistles win their provincial championship series. But his reputation was growing far beyond the woods of northern Ontario. The top teams in the country, based in cities like Montreal and Ottawa, were taking notice. He joined the prestigious Ottawa Hockey Club, a powerhouse in the Canadian Amateur Hockey League. Here, his career truly blossomed, but he quickly distinguished himself in one crucial way. In an era where stick-swinging, tripping, and outright brawling were commonplace, Hod Stuart earned a reputation as a remarkably clean, sportsmanlike player. He used his size and strength to outmuscle opponents, not to injure them. He was dominant, but he was fair. This combination of elite skill and gentlemanly conduct made him one of the most respected players in the game. But respect didn't pay the bills. Stuart was a working man. In the off-seasons, he worked as a bricklayer and a builder, skilled trades he had learned from his father. He was courting a young woman named Laufey, and he had dreams of providing for a family. The meager, under-the-table payments that some amateur players received weren't enough to build a future on. Then, an offer came that would change his life and make him a central figure in the sport's greatest controversy. A mining town in northern Michigan, Houghton, was home to the Portage Lakes Hockey Club. They were building a professional team to compete against other industrial towns like Pittsburgh and Sault Ste. Marie. They offered Hod Stuart a contract, real money, out in the open, to play hockey. In the winter of 1902, Stuart accepted. He crossed the border, left the world of amateurism behind, and became one of the first true professional hockey superstars. To the Canadian amateur authorities, he was a traitor. To his fellow working-class players, he was a pioneer. The moment Hod Stuart put on the Portage Lakes jersey, he became more than just a hockey player. He became a symbol. To the amateur purists in Canada, he was the embodiment of everything wrong with the professional game, a mercenary selling his talents to the highest bidder. But to Stuart, it was simple. He had a rare and valuable skill, and he deserved to be compensated for it. His journey as a professional took him across the nascent landscape of pro hockey. After a successful season in Houghton, he was lured to the Pittsburgh Professionals of the International Professional Hockey League, IPHL, the first fully professional hockey league in the world. The contract made him one of the highest-paid athletes in North America. He was no longer just a bricklayer who played hockey. He was a professional athlete, earning a living for his family, which now included his wife, Laufey, and the first of their two daughters. He was a sensation in the IPHL. American audiences, new to the sport, were captivated by his size, his fluid skating, and his powerful end-to-end rushes. He was the league's premier defenseman, its biggest star. But the life of an early pro was transient. He played for teams in Calumet, Michigan, and for the Pittsburgh Victorias, often following the most stable contracts and the biggest paydays. This team-hopping further fueled the mercenary narrative, but it was driven by a simple, human desire to provide security for his growing family. He wasn't just playing for glory anymore. He was building a foundation brick by brick, just as he did in the off-season. His importance to the professional game went beyond his on-ice performance. He became a respected voice among the players. He was instrumental in the continued organization and stabilization of the IPHL, advocating for players' rights and helping to establish a code of conduct. He was not just a player for hire, he was a league builder. After several successful but grueling seasons in the United States, the tide began to turn back in Canada. The sheer amount of talent leaving for the American leagues forced the Canadian clubs to adapt. In 1906, the Eastern Canada Amateur Hockey Association, ECAHA, the country's top league, made a groundbreaking decision. They would allow professional players to compete alongside amateurs. The war was over, and professionalism had won. This decision opened the door for Stuart's return. The Montreal Wanderers, a team stacked with legendary talent, offered him a contract to come home. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. The Wanderers were the New York Yankees of their day, a veritable super team featuring future Hall of Famers like Art Ross and Ernie Moose Johnson. For Hod Stuart, it was the culmination of his journey. He was returning to Canada not as a pariah, but as a conquering hero, one of the best and highest-paid players in the world. The 1907 season was the pinnacle of his career. Alongside his brother Bruce, who had also joined the Wanderers, Hod led the team to a dominant season. They were an unstoppable force, winning the ECAHA championship and, with it, the Stanley Cup. Hod Stuart, the boy from Rat Portage, the bricklayer who became a professional pioneer, was a champion. He was at the absolute summit of the hockey world, respected, well-paid, and back in his home country. He had achieved everything he had set out to do. As the season ended in the spring of 1907, he announced his retirement from the sport, intending to focus full-time on his construction business and his family. He had a new house to build and a long, peaceful life to look forward to. Behind the on-ice accolades and the controversies of his professional career, Hod Stuart was, by all accounts, a quiet, devoted family man. His entire professional journey, the constant moving from city to city, the criticism he endured, it was all in service of one goal: creating a stable and prosperous life for his wife, Laufey, and their two young daughters, Muriel and Lila. In an era before million-dollar endorsement deals, being a professional athlete was a precarious existence. Stuart's work as a bricklayer and contractor was not a hobby. It was his other career, the one he knew would support his family long after his legs grew tired. Those who knew him off the ice described a man of quiet dignity. He wasn't a boisterous, larger-than-life personality. He was thoughtful, steady, and universally liked, even by his fiercest opponents. A newspaper tribute after his death quoted an unnamed hockey veteran who said, "I have met many men in the hockey world, but I have yet to meet the equal of Hod Stuart as a man. He was the finest man I ever met in my life." This sentiment was echoed time and again. He commanded respect not through intimidation, but through his integrity. His reputation as a gentleman player is all the more remarkable given the sheer brutality of the game at the time. Serious injuries were common. In that same 1907 season, a player named Owen "Bud" McCourt was killed on the ice after being struck by a group of players during a game in Cornwall, Ontario. The incident led to manslaughter charges. This was the world Hod Stuart inhabited, a sport where a man could lose his life. Yet, Stuart was consistently named as one of the cleanest, most sportsmanlike players in any league he played in. He proved that it was possible to be a dominant physical force without resorting to dirty tactics. This makes the end of his life story all the more tragic in its profound ordinariness. It was the summer of 1907. The triumphant Stanley Cup season was behind him. He was back in southern Ontario, working as a foreman for the Grand Trunk Railway, overseeing the construction of a new railway wharf in Belleville on the shore of the Bay of Quinte. He was also building a new brick house for his family. Life was good. On the afternoon of June 23, 1907, after finishing his work for the day, a hot and tired Stuart decided to go for a swim to cool off. He walked to the end of the wharf at the local swimming hole. He was with a group of friends and fellow workers. For a moment of fun, he decided to perform a trick dive into the water below. He climbed a small pile of lumber to get a bit of extra height. From there, he launched himself into a swan dive, but he had tragically misjudged the depth. As he plunged headfirst into the water, his head struck a submerged rock outcropping just beneath the surface. He was killed instantly. His friends, horrified, watched him disappear. They frantically searched the water for him, and after a short time, his body was recovered. Hod Stuart, the powerful athlete who had survived years in one of the world's most violent sports, was dead at the age of 28. The news sent a shockwave of disbelief and sorrow across two nations. For a man celebrated for his clean play and gentlemanly conduct, Hod Stuart's career was not without its complexities. The most significant debate surrounding him was the one that defined his professional life. Was he a mercenary, or was he a pioneer? From the perspective of the Canadian amateur establishment, his actions were a betrayal. He had abandoned his home team and country for American money, contributing to the brain drain of Canada's best talent. They saw him as a symbol of the commercialization that they believed was corrupting the noble spirit of the game. However, from Stuart's perspective, and that of many working-class people, the argument was entirely different. He was a man with a family to support and a finite number of years in which his athletic skills would be at their peak. The amateur ideal was a luxury that men who didn't have to work for a living could afford. Stuart was simply asserting a fundamental right, the right of a skilled laborer to be paid a fair wage for his work. In this light, he was a trailblazer, one of the first hockey players to successfully challenge the hypocritical amateur system and help establish the legitimacy of professional sports. He wasn't just chasing money, he was fighting for the principle that an athlete's talent had monetary value. But perhaps the most revealing and rarely discussed incident of his career adds a fascinating layer of human complexity to his story. It occurred during his final season, on January 12, 1907. The Montreal Wanderers were playing a notoriously rough game against the Montreal Victorias. The game was filled with violent stickwork and brawling. Late in the match, Stuart got into an altercation with a player named Sprague Cleghorn, a man who himself would become a Hall of Famer, but who was also known as one of the dirtiest players of his generation. In a shocking, uncharacteristic moment, Hod Stuart wheeled around and struck Cleghorn on the head with his stick, knocking him unconscious and opening a deep gash that required stitches. The act stunned everyone. This was not the Hod Stuart anyone knew. He was immediately ejected from the game, and the press was merciless, decrying the brutality of the Wanderers' star. But what happened next spoke volumes about Stuart's true character. He was reportedly overwhelmed with remorse. He didn't make excuses. Instead, he went to the hospital to visit Cleghorn, apologizing profusely for his actions. The two men made peace. While the incident remains a blemish on his otherwise spotless record, it serves as a powerful reminder of the immense pressure and violence that even the most composed players had to endure in that era. For one moment, the gentleman snapped, and in his profound regret, he revealed the depth of his character more than any clean play ever could. The death of Hod Stuart was not treated as a minor event. It was front-page news across Canada and in the hockey hubs of the United States. The sense of loss was immense and immediate. Tributes poured in from former teammates, opponents, and sports writers, all mourning the loss of not just a great player, but a great man. The prevailing sentiment was one of profound shock that a man so full of life and at the peak of his powers could be gone so suddenly. But this collective grief quickly transformed into a desire to do something tangible, something to help the family he had left behind. His widow, Laufey, was now alone with two young daughters and an unfinished house. It was Stuart's former Wanderers teammate, Arthur Billy Baird, who first proposed the idea. He suggested that the hockey community should organize a special benefit game, with all the proceeds going directly to the Stuart family. The idea was revolutionary. Nothing like it had ever been done before. It quickly gained momentum, championed by the top officials in the ECAHA. The plan was set. The reigning Stanley Cup champion Montreal Wanderers would play against a team composed of the best players, the All-Stars, from the other teams in the league. Legends of the era, men who were fierce on-ice rivals of the Wanderers, eagerly signed on. The roster of the All-Star team was a who's who of early hockey greatness, including names like Art Ross, Russell Bowie, and the Patrick brothers, Lester and Frank, who would go on to become hugely influential figures in the sport. On January 2nd, 1908, at the Montreal Arena, the event took place. It was more than just a game. It was a solemn, yet celebratory gathering of the entire hockey world. Thousands of fans attended, paying tribute to their fallen hero. The game itself was a fast-paced, thrilling affair, but the outcome was secondary. The event was a resounding success, raising over $2,000 for the Stuart family, a massive sum at the time, equivalent to more than $60,000 today. The historical significance of this one game cannot be overstated. It was the first ever All-Star Game in hockey history. It established a powerful precedent that despite the intense competition and business rivalries, the hockey community was a family, capable of coming together to support one of its own in a time of need. This single act of compassion and unity became Stuart's most enduring legacy. Every time the modern NHL holds its All-Star Weekend, it is continuing a tradition born from this tragedy. In 1945, when the Hockey Hall of Fame was established, Hod Stuart was one of the first 9 players inducted, a formal recognition of his foundational importance to the sport. In the end, the story of Hod Stuart is one of beautiful and tragic contradictions. He was a gentle soul who excelled in a brutal sport. He was a loyal family man who was branded a mercenary for daring to earn a living. He was a Stanley Cup champion and a celebrated pioneer of his profession, whose life ended not in a moment of sporting glory, but in a quiet moment of summer leisure. While the Stanley Cups he won and the records he set are noted in history books, his true legacy is something far more profound. It's a legacy of unity. The All-Star Game, a tradition that now spans more than a century, is a living memorial to him. It stands as a testament to the idea that the bonds of community can be stronger than the heat of competition. Hod Stuart spent his life building things. As a bricklayer and a contractor, he built structures with his hands. As a hockey player, he helped build the very foundations of the professional game. But the most lasting thing he ever helped to build was something he never got to see. A tradition of remembrance and respect that proves year after year that some things are more important than just winning a game. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.